Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the ATP Project. Today we have got Steve and Jeff with us, and me, which I'm usually not in this one, so it's pretty cool for me. Been allowed in for a change. And we have a really special guest with us today. So Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, we just discussed that and I probably still botched it up. But
well, how do you say it? Wait, set the record straight, Will. Yeah.
Well, okay, so let me just come forward and say this. I am willing to accept any version of my name that is not a profanity.
Right.
Okay. You can say anything, but as long as you're not swearing at me, I'm okay.
Okay.
So our family, we have said Bulsiewicz, but there's a reason why everyone calls me Dr. B. In the clinic, I'm Dr. B. So I'm more than happy to have you call me Dr. B.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Sounds perfect to me. All right, Dr. B.
Let's do that.
All right. So Dr. B is a gastroenterologist working out of South Carolina, and has just put out a new book called Fiber Fueled, which is a really amazing book, and we're going to go into that more throughout the interview. But before we get going, can you just give us a little bit of a background of, where you come from, how you've sort of ended up where you are as far as getting into the gut health scene?
This is it's so weird for me to be here to talk about this. I'm so excited to be here. I love what you guys do and what you're all about, but it's just weird because I'm a very much type A personality with a vision for the next 5 to 10 years. And I always think it's going to happen. And then I end up in a different place that I feel like, gosh, like there is a higher power. God must have wanted me to do this, because I got basically dragged into it. I never had the intention of being an author. I never really thought that I would become any sort of gut health or nutrition guy. I was someone who really enjoyed eating hot dogs and cold cut subs.
Right.
And what happened is that I'm a gastroenterologist. I chose this field out of a passion for the medicine for the different parts of the body, the esophagus, stomach, pancreas, the liver, the intestines, the colon. I chose this field for those reasons, and to be able to use my hands and also to use my mind and connect with patients. But if you go back about 10 years ago, I was in my early 30s and I had a health crisis of my own. I was 20 kilos overweight. I was perpetually fatigued, high anxiety, very, very low self-esteem, and high blood pressure. And I am the chief medical resident at Northwestern in Chicago, one of the top residency programs in the United States. And yet I don't know how to fix myself. The only tools that I have in my toolkit are pills and procedures. And I didn't want to have to take a pill. And I also knew a pill wasn't going to help me lose the 20 kilos that I had gained. So I had to figure out, I knew there was a problem. I knew that I didn't feel well, and I knew that I didn't look the way I wanted to look when I was looking into the mirror. So I had to figure out a way to get out of this. And I tried exercising like an absolute, animal, 6 days a week, 90 minutes a day. I grew stronger. I got faster. I still had a gut. I still had low self-esteem. And ultimately, what I had to do was look in the mirror, not literally, but figuratively. I had to look in the mirror and accept that the diet that I was raised on, that the foods that were celebrated in my family were actually the problem. And it seems kind of silly in hindsight to say, I was eating fast food and hot dogs and cold cut subs. And of course, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But that was very normal.
Yeah.
That's very normal. That's how people eat in the United States.
This is why it's called the SAD diet, correct?
Yeah.
It's the same in Australia. The acronym works. This is the standard American diet, the standard Australian diet, and it is SAD.
It's very sad. And it literally is linked to clinical depression. So for me, I had to figure out how to get this fixed. And actually my life changed. It's kind of interesting. My life changed when I met the person who is my wife, because we were on a date. We were at a restaurant and I looked across the table and I was like, who is this person ordering, like they have all of these great options and you're ordering only plants. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I'd never been around anyone. Like I honestly didn't know the difference between a vegan and a vegetarian at this point in my life. And I'd never been around anyone like this. But what I did notice is that she ate all of her food. She was satisfied. She enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed my pork chop. And yet after the meal was over, I had to go home and put on some sweatpants and like make groaning noises.
Meat sweats.
She was, yeah, I had the meat sweats and she was ready to keep going.
Yeah.
Oy, okay.
And so it opened my mind and I started making small changes. And as I made these changes, the fat is just melting off my body. The anxiety is lifting. My self-esteem is surging. And I start feeling like someone in their early 30s again, the way you should feel.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful that I said to myself, how come I haven't heard anything about this in all of my excellent medical training? And I turned to the medical literature and I discovered there's an entire world of science that was not presented to me in my medical training that explains the connections of our body and nutrition and why this is so important. So I brought it into my clinic as a gastroenterologist. I saw radical changes in my patients. It was so moving to me what was happening in my clinic that I felt compelled to do something out of character for me. I don't actually like social media, but I felt like I need to share this story.
Yeah.
So I started sharing the story on social media. Then I started podcasting. Then in 2018, I did a podcast with someone that you guys know, Simon Hill.
Oh, Simon, yeah. Great.
And that podcast went viral. And when it went viral, I said, gosh, like people are freaking out. There's an energy here. I need to do something to bottle up this energy. And I decided to write a book. And the book came out in the pandemic, May 2020. Here we are slightly more than a year later, and we've sold 150,000 copies.
That's great.
A New York Times bestselling book.
Fantastic.
And I'm happy to be here to talk to you guys.
No, absolutely. Oh, so many questions that I've got. Sorry, Nick.
You go, mate.
if I
I've
can
got tons too.
So a couple of things. I mean, in terms of, I'm really interested, obviously coming from the medical fraternity, if you like, one of the things, again, our company is very based on nature. And even though we sell supplements, we always say like food is your medicine and medicine be your food, which is obviously the basis of the Hippocratic Oath, which I love. And it's fantastic to hear, you know, we love integrated doctors and we love doctors that look at things holistically as well too, who understand that, you know, food is really the foundation of health. Food and exercise and prevention is, you know, a pinch of prevention is worth a pound of cure. How did your peers, how did your medical associations respond when you started, you know, talking about the importance of fiber? Did you get much pushback? Was it embraced or was it met with skepticism?
You know, I think that any time that you step outside the box of normal, whether you are in medicine or any facet of life, if you step outside the box of conventional and normal, you are going to attract attention. You are going to have people that will tell you that you're crazy in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And then as time goes on, they're either going to tell you that you're dumb or that you're a genius. And those are the two options, right?
There's that famous saying. That's it. First they dismiss you and laugh at you. And then secondly, they argue with you and then they accept it as fact. I forget who says that, but that's so true.
That was Gandhi.
Is it right? There you go.
That was Gandhi.
Yeah.
There you go. That was good. So, yeah, I mean, I think the thing is this. If you're going to go out there and become an author, you better be prepared to accept that there's going to be a huge percentage of people that disagree with you. And that's just the way it works. And, you know, the motivation in sharing the message is that you so wholeheartedly believe in what you're doing that you're willing to make personal sacrifices in order to get this message out to the world. And, you know, writing this book was not a financial transaction for me. And I work full-time as a medical doctor. 24 out of every 72 hours, I'm on call.
Wow.
So I'm like constantly on call. And I wrote this book at 5 a.m. And it's because I had the passion where I felt like this needed to be said. And I'm quite sure there are people who disagree with me. Comes with the territory. And there are also a lot of people who are very kind, and they reach out and they say nice things and tell me that I changed their life. And so sometimes I feel like I get more credit than I deserve, to be totally honest with you. So I'm not sweating too hard on whether or not there's a couple doctors out there who don't agree with me.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I respect that.
And I guess if you're going to change the world and change the status quo, and really, again, there's no point in writing a book where everybody goes, oh, we knew that. I mean, you're not going to be a best-selling author and sell 150,000 copies. You might sell 150 to your friends and family if that information is already kind of known, right? So,
well, and the funny thing is, it seems like, to me, I felt like, gosh, I'm writing a book about fiber. Like, I thought we all agree that fiber is good for you.
Yeah.
But, you know, apparently there was an opportunity where people wanted to hear that fiber was good for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, if you correct me if where I'm wrong, because I haven't looked into this information recently. In Australia and in New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand, the Western world, typically America, the RDI or the RDA, depending on whether you're in America or in Australia, recommends 25 grams of fiber. Is that correct? And that the average person is consuming about 15. So they're really only getting just over half of what is recommended. And this is a double-barreled question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. And do you think that amount of fiber of 25 grams is even what is required?
Yeah, so the 25 grams of fiber in the United States, the Institute of Medicine recommends 25 grams of fiber for women.
Right.
It's in part based upon your body weight. So for the average man, the recommendation is actually 38 grams of fiber.
Wow. Okay.
And both of those recommendations, from my perspective, I would describe as inadequate. I think that those to me are the minimal amount that we should be getting. And, you know, the issue, as you described, people in our countries are not consuming fiber. Why? Because our diet is, in the US, and I know the standard Australian diet is pretty much the same thing. Our diet is 60% ultra processed food. What do you do with ultra processed food? You strip it of its nutrients, including the fiber, and then you pour some chemicals in there and you package it, and it never changes, and it sits on the shelf for 2 years, and you could open it 2 years later and it's the same way that it was the day that you created it. That's ultra processed food. And then 30% of the American diet, and I believe it's about the same in Australia. I believe that we are leading the charge in terms of per capita meat consumption. 30% of the American diet is animal products. And now, could you consume animal products and be healthy? Of course you can. But the fiber content of that percentage of your diet is zero.
Yeah.
And so what's left is just 10%. That is fruits, vegetables, whole grain, seeds, nuts, and legumes, like real food that, you know, if I gave you a farm, you could grow this. That's only 10% of our calories. That's where the fiber exists. And it's no wonder that we're so wildly devoid of fiber that when we do fiber studies in the United States, the high fiber group has an average consumption of 22 grams of fiber. So
wow.
In the United States, the high fiber consumers are still getting less than the minimal recommended amount. And the funny thing about it is then we strut around and we go, but where are you going to get your protein from? And it's 97% that are consuming an excessive amount of protein.
Right.
I mean, so it's just very twisted. We got to get this straight.
Yeah.
It's amazing because plants are something that food eats, is what some people say in Australia, you know, because they love their meat. But what I'd love to question you about is about, you've all heard that. I don't know if you've heard that saying.
Yeah, no, actually I haven't, Steve, but that sounds about right. This is your metasauruses.
Yeah, metasauruses. It's funny because you mentioned before about, you know, in your 30s having anxiety and all that thing. And one of my loves is how the gut affects your brain. And I think it's a huge topic. And, you know, I was speaking to my father-in-law, who's a medical doctor, has been for over 50 years. And you know, I said something, we commented to him about, over 90% of the serotonin is made in your gut. And then I started talking about something else. And he goes, hang on, what? Serotonin? Isn't that a brain chemical? And I said, well, it's really, most of it's made in your gut. And he goes, and then he's absolutely fascinated by that. And because people think serotonin is a brain chemical. But I was wondering if you could comment on the effect that your healthy bowels, healthy fiber have on your, we know the bowels, but the brain. I mean, have you done much research into that area?
100%. Your gut's best friend is your brain, and vice versa. And they are constantly talking to to one another. Literally right this moment, as we sit here, for each one of us, including every single listener at home, their gut is talking to their brain is talking to their gut. There's a number of different ways that they can communicate to one another. It's kind of like, look, we could contact one another through Zoom or through Instagram or over the phone, or I could send smoke signals to Australia and hope that you'll see them, right? Yep. There's so many ways that we communicate with one another as humans. Your gut and your brain have the same sort of relationship. So basically, starting with your gut, you have this entire world inside of you. It is an ecosystem, 38 trillion microbes living inside you. That is 100 galaxies full of stars inside your colon. And they're there interacting with you and your body perpetually, constantly. And one of the things that they do is they produce chemicals. They produce chemicals that are signaling molecules. So serotonin, 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. 50% of dopamine is produced in the gut. But if you asked me, Dr. B, how many neurotransmitters are there in the gut? If you asked me this 10 years ago, I would say, I don't know, 6, 8. There are over 30 neurotransmitters produced in the gut. There are precursor molecules to serotonin, like 5-HT, also produced in the gut that can cross the blood-brain barrier. The gut is also producing compounds, like, for example, short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids are capable of repairing the gut barrier. Short-chain fatty acids are capable of repairing the blood-brain barrier. So like people who have brain fog, their doctor dismisses them, goes, brain fog, I don't even know what that is. I'm going to tell you what it is. Brain fog is leaky brain. It's the same thing as leaky gut. The same tight junctions that exist in the lining of your gut also exist in the lining of the blood-brain barrier. And butyrate and the short-chain fatty acids can fix and repair the tight junctions both in your gut and in your brain, and basically lead to an anti-inflammatory effect as a result of this. So, not to mention, one last thing, the gut is also capable of communicating with the brain through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is an information superhighway. And all of these nerves, by the way, your gut is lined with literally millions of nerves, right? 5 times more nerves in your gut than you have in your spinal cord. And all of these nerves are out there right now, feeling, sensing, assessing the situation. And that information, all that information is getting collected by the vagus nerve, travels north up to the brain, and the brain is using that information to understand how it's supposed to react to this world and this environment that we find ourselves in. So many different ways for the gut to communicate to the brain. On the flip side, just to kind of cut to the chase real quick, the brain can communicate through the vagus nerve as well. The brain can also produce hormones, which can affect your gut. This is why when we get stressed, it can many times manifest in our gut. When I was in medical school, people had diarrhea on test day because they were stressed, because your brain is producing a hormone called CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, which travels throughout the entire body, including to the gut, alters digestive function, alters the gut microbiome, temporarily induces dysbiosis, which basically means a damaged gut, a loss of balance within the gut. And there you are, stressful situation, you're manifesting it there in your gut, not in your brain, because your brain is communicating to your gut. So we've all experienced that. The bottom line is they're talking to one another. They're talking right now. And if you want to heal your brain, if you want optimal focus, if you want optimal mood, I would suggest you should start by healing your gut first.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's glaringly obvious, particularly in clinic. I see so many clients that are on SSRIs and SNRIs, and they still have anxiety.
What are they? For us lay people.
So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, basically.
Yep.
So that's supposed to obviously help to balance those neurotransmitters in the brain. But we're seeing clients that still have anxiety and still have depression, and they've been on these medications for quite some time. And that is because a lot of the problem is beginning in the gut, or it's in the gut. So, and we're not looking at the gut. And obviously gut health has become a huge thing now, which is awesome. But I think there's still a huge disconnect on quite a lot of different conditions, mental health issues, even immunity, which we'll go into, which is a big topic at the moment, and how that actually connects back to the gut. And I think that we really need to look there as a beginning to see the offshoot of these different conditions.
Yeah. I want to get maybe a little bit later on, because I think the health aspects, as far as obviously these serious diseases or the ability to address some of those through changes in the diet and incorporating fiber. I know that our listeners are absolutely going to be fascinated to ask two questions, and it depends on where they're coming from. A lot of our listeners would be going, okay, so 10 years ago you were overweight, not happy, and you've changed this by incorporating more fiber into your diet. What do you eat, and how much weight did you lose, and how long did it take?
Yeah, happy to answer those. So here I am. I'm almost 41. Like, I'm going to be turning 41 in a little over a week.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm in the best shape of my life. I've never felt so good. I've never felt so energized. I love the way that I feel, the way that I look. And I credit these changes and frankly healing my gut with being responsible for that. I made small changes over the course of time. If you read my book, it's not just grams of fiber. Some people have actually criticized me and said, well, you never told us how many grams of fiber. Well, that's because it's not how many grams of fiber. Mm-hmm. The important thing from my perspective, if you want, let me turn my attention to the listeners at home for a moment and just speak to them. I don't care what your current diet is. I can assure you my diet was worse. Right? And there is no such thing as perfect.
Yeah.
There is just progress.
Yeah.
So we should take whatever your current diet is and start to move it in the right direction. What is the North Star? What is the direction that we're trying to go with our diet to optimize gut health? In the American Gut Project, which, by the way, was not just American, it included Australians and New Zealanders, and it was led by Rob Knight, who is from New Zealand. In the American Gut Project, it is the largest study to date to allow us to make connections between our diet, our lifestyle, and the health of our gut microbiome. And when they performed the analysis, there was one clear-cut, most powerful independent predictor of a healthy gut: the diversity of plants in your diet. So let me just break this down real quick. Fiber is not just grams of fiber. Every plant has fiber, and it has unique types of fiber. So like the fiber in beans is not the same as the fiber in kale. And our gut microbes, their preferred food is fiber. They thrive when we feed them fiber. The reason why is because fiber is not digested by the human intestine. So it arrives in the colon the way that it started, which is perfect, because then the gut microbes, they get to eat. And they consume this fiber, they grow stronger, they multiply. And then what they do is they turn around, they take this fiber and they produce something that we've already talked about a little bit: short chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, and propionate. But the thing that I want people to understand is that these gut bugs, they're kind of like us. Like, they have personalities, they have unique skill sets. They don't all do the same thing. And they have dietary preferences. Some of them are picky eaters. They don't all like the same food. So it's not quite simply grams of fiber. What it is that we want a diverse microbiota. We want as many different species as possible, because every species is unique and can potentially help us. And to get all of those different species, we need to make sure they all get fed. So what I have done in my life, the small, simple change that I made that was radical and transformative, was to increase the diversity of plants in my diet. Stop counting grams of fiber, start counting plants. In the American Gut Project, what they found was that the healthiest people in terms of their gut microbiome were the people consuming more than 30 different plants per week.
Wow.
So that's what I would encourage people to do. I would challenge the listeners who are with us today. I don't care what you would call your dietary pattern. I'm going to assume that you probably eat some plants, and you should focus on adding more variety to those plants. So get different types.
One of the things that we have spoken about before on the podcast is we have a lot of high-end performance athletes that we work with, a lot of fitness and figure competitors, bodybuilders, and what have you. And oftentimes, and that's where I started, was servicing that. That's where I fell in love with nutrition and supplementation as an addition to the food. But and I sort of became involved in that community. One of the things that we sort of poke a bit of fun at now, and Tony and I, that's my wife and I, as we were in that industry for 10 years, and we actually started looking, going, hang on, these guys might look and girls might look amazing, but they're not healthy. Their food is so restricted. We call it the chickily diet, which is the chicken and broccoli, and that's pretty much all they eat, right? And diversity is obviously huge. One of the other major barriers as well too, especially for the lay people, and for people trying to get into it, and they've got their personal trainers and all the rest of it. I love the progress, not perfection, because if people feel like they haven't perfected that day, they've set the barrier too high, and then they throw the towel in, and then they're out eating donuts and hot dogs, right? And because they feel like they're a failure, and you mentioned that, and that's really important. The other one is also the restriction of things like fruits, because a lot of people go, okay, fine, I can eat my my cauliflower, I can eat my broccoli, I can eat my my lettuce and my low nutritive sort of vegetables. But as soon as it comes to things like apples and obviously you've got the kiwi fruit on the front of your book, and I love pomegranates. I think pomegranates are one of the most amazing compounds, right? I mean, there's so many amazing nutrients within our fruit, but people then go, no, if I eat fruit, that's bad. And it's funny because Tony and I are listening to a podcast. We listen to it regularly. And there's a woman there, she's not a fitness woman, she's actually in her 60s, and we've watched her slowly lose about 20 kilos, about 40 pounds. And it's funny because we were wondering, I wonder how she's done it. And she said the only thing that she changed is she started drinking more water, and she started incorporating a lot more fruit into her diet as well too, as well as obviously vegetables, which I think this is obviously an anecdotal sort of example of increasing the fiber. So what do you have to say to those people that are afraid of specifically fruit and about being, we've already mentioned about obviously, limiting a diverse diet, that we need to have a diverse diet. But for those people that are afraid of fruit.
I think the ideal diet has balance. I wouldn't sit here and tell you to consume a fruit-only diet. I don't think that's a good choice. But I think that some of the hate about fruit, well, not some. I mean, I think that the hate about fruit in general has just gone way too far, and I don't really understand it. People act as if fruit causes diabetes, yet when we study fruit, what do we see? We see less likelihood of developing diabetes the more fruit that you consume. People act as if fruit causes weight gain. It's just sugar. Well, what do we see when people eat more fruit? They lose weight. Why? Because fruit is not just sugar in isolation. Fruit is an entire matrix, and which, by the way, is an important part of understanding food. The matrix, which is the structure of the food, that includes, yes, some sugar, but it's balanced out with fiber and polyphenols.
Yeah.
Both of which are great for the gut, both of which activate satiety hormones. And the important thing that what you want is you want that activation of the satiety hormones, because when you accomplish that, you can eat until you're full. You can be just as satisfied as any other person out there in terms of the meal, but you actually will be consuming less calories in that process. And it will be high quality calories, which are filled with the fiber, the polyphenols, the phytochemicals, and all of these different parts of these plants that when you start to break them down and look at them in isolation, you go, whoa, fiber, that is so healthy. Holy cow, polyphenols, they're great. These phytochemicals, oh my gosh, they're amazing. But hold up. The fruit is just a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
It's an apple, right? Eat the apple and you will lose weight and prevent diabetes.
It's this whole, if it fits your macros, it really really upsets me. And I get it from a point of view of these guys. And it's like, no, make it fit your macros. So in other words, you can reverse that, right? So you can say, okay, so this has got to hit my macronutrients, but what about your micros? As you said, the polyphenols, the fiber, the vitamins and the minerals. I think most people will accept vitamins and minerals are important, but oftentimes they'll just run and they'll just grab a multivitamin. And look, that can be great if you're really deficient, if you're under stress, but realistically, you should be eating fresh, local, a diversity of food, and you should be getting most of those things naturally. I appreciate with the way that modern farming practices are done that the elimination of copper on our apples, for example, has been documented in a Harvard research study, which has shown that. But if you can eat fresh and local, in season, and start with doing that, that's probably a great place to start. But you're right. Yeah. This food is so much more than just protein, fats, and carbohydrates.
100%. And I think that the other thing too is that, there are many different approaches to diet that can help you to accomplish specific goals that you have. So, a calorie restricted diet may help you to accomplish your weight goals, but are you paying a price in the long term in the process of doing that? That's the question, because if you're shortening your life expectancy at the expense of looking good for one summer, is that a price that you're willing to pay? Or alternatively, is there a different dietary pattern that is less restrictive where you can still look good for the summer and actually prolong your life expectancy? And so I think that these are important things for people to think about. It's not just the short-term goal. It's also what effect is this? You can look great on the outside, as you mentioned. You can look great on the outside and be rotting at the core.
And that's what I see a lot in clinic is people, they'll be on a specific diet and they get great results. And as they continue, then the results start to go backwards. So then they will hang on, this worked for me initially, now it doesn't, what's going on? And then further to that, talking about restrictive diets, talking about those people that have a lot of food intolerances, that have, issues with FODMAPs, so many different issues as far as sort of destruction to their microbiome. And they say, I actually can't eat that because I have all these side effects. So how do you go about incorporating the fibers and that sort of thing into their diet where they can progress in a way that is, not painful for them? Or how do you sort of approach that? Because there's so many people that really struggle with that sort of thing.
Okay, let me turn the tables on you for a quick moment and ask you a couple quick basic questions that I know you're going to know the answer to. So if you want to strengthen your biceps, what would you do?
Yeah, well, you would lift weight and you would...
Right.
Yeah.
Bicep curls.
And you would lift...
But you would do...
You would do bicep curls.
Yeah.
But there's a certain amount that you would do, right? Like there's an amount that is just beyond, like it's an amount of work that you're capable of doing. And by doing it, you are making yourself stronger, but you're not going to go to the gym and grab 100 kilos off the rack and start curling that, because you would hurt yourself.
I do, but
no one else.
Steve, I've seen Steve do that.
Look, you want a bicep curl?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, so progressive overload is what you're saying.
You're a natural man, and you were blessed with that.
Yeah.
But
Nick and I use the plastic dumbbells at the other end.
Hang on to speak for yourself there.
Okay, I'm using the plastic dumbbells down the far end.
She's strong.
So there's the methodology, right? There's the methodology when we want to grow, when we want to get stronger. There's a methodology when we go to the gym that every single one of us understands, where you go to the gym, you lift a certain amount of weight that's just beyond what you were doing 2 weeks ago, right? It's a little bit more, you're pushing yourself a little bit harder. And you understand that, like, particularly in the very beginning, there's going to be some soreness that comes with going to the gym. That comes with the territory. You expect that, you anticipate it, you grow beyond it, and you keep pushing yourself. And what happens is over the course of time, you get stronger. And like hypothetically, the concept is exactly the same if you hurt yourself, right? Like if you hurt your shoulder, you have to restore function to that shoulder. You have to grow it and get it stronger again. And there's a process to that too. It's just that it's more like kind of back to the fundamentals, where if you hurt your shoulder, you're not lifting 25 pounds or like 10 kilos over your head. You're literally just trying to lift your arm and you're stretching it and you're getting back to the very fundamentals and the basics. So the reason why I bring this up with you guys is that this is the analogy that works in terms of understanding how your gut functions, Your gut is a muscle. It can be trained. It can be made stronger. But if you want to train it, and if you want it to become stronger, you have to work it. And if you stop working it, it's not going to get stronger. It's going to get weaker.
Yeah, incredible.
Right? So if you are trying to get your biceps stronger, of course you have to lift biceps. And if you stop lifting biceps entirely and you never do biceps, but you do triceps, at the same routine, you're going to have some weird looking arms because those triceps are going to be nice and plump. They're going to be juicy. And those biceps are going to be shriveled up and there's not going to be anything there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So this is where balance comes in. So to answer your question, how do we take these people suffering from food intolerances, or how do we take the person who hasn't been eating beans and get them to reintroduce it? And you do it the exact same way that I'm describing for someone who's either going to the gym or someone who is going through rehab, trying to restore function to a part of their body. You start super low at a level that your body is actually capable of doing, right? Because that's what you would do in the gym. You don't go beyond what you're capable of. So you start nice and low, which is an amount that you're capable of. And then you introduce the food and you slowly ramp it up over the course of time. And what happens is, just like your body will adapt to work, adapt to exercise, so does your gut. Your gut microbes will adapt to what you're asking them to do. They will grow stronger. They will multiply. Your gut will become more functional. It will be designed for the purpose that you're asking it to be designed for. And over the course of time, if you continue this pattern, introducing, for example, these beans, start super low. How about just a teaspoon? And then you work your way up from that point and you give it time and you stick with it, just like with exercise or just like rehabbing a part of your body. You will grow stronger. You will get your gut back. And then you will be able to basically eat without restriction because your gut will be strong again.
Incredible.
Actually, beans, it leads me to my next subject. I was thinking of bringing out a book called Your Fart and You. But no, seriously though, we know that flatulence obviously is, and the gases that are produced actually do tell a bit of a story, as well as obviously leave a bit of a smell. But what can you tell us about, obviously, that the digestion? I mean, whether it's, I know it's a funny topic, and we're sort of laughing about it before, but in terms of burping, gas, upset stomach, flatulence, and all that sort of stuff, what have you learnt into your dive into gut health and into fiber?
Oh gosh, we could talk about this for so long. So
It's one of my favorite subjects, actually. Steve and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. I'm just kidding.
You guys were born to be gastroenterologists. You were supposed to be gastroenterologists. This is literally what I do all day long. So,
Right.
Before jumping into gas and flatulence and things of that variety, let me first start by acknowledging that I honestly think our bowel movements should be the fifth vital sign. Or the sixth vital sign. I think that our bowel movements, which provide a window into the health of our digestive system, a very clear window. Most people don't realize this. They think that their bowel movement is just the excrement of your food. Like that is the waste of your food. We even call it waste. It's not. 60% of the weight of your stool, 60% are microbes. Your bowel movement is a reflection of your gut microbiome. And when your gut is healthy, you have good, healthy, glorious bowel movements. Like they're fun. It feels good. And when your gut is not in a friendly place, you're going to struggle. And that's when you have diarrhea and constipation. The reason I bring that up is that before talking about gas, I feel compelled to say that, I think this whole package, looking at gas, looking at bowel movements, I understand there's a stigma. We feel weird talking about it. We need to destigmatize it. We need to open up, because this is an important part of human health. If you believe after listening to this show that your digestive function matters to your health, then we should be talking about bowel movements and passing gas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with regard to that, when I think about gas, bloating, flatulence, belching, Let me just kind of walk through real quick systematically the way that I approach this. There's basically 4 things that I'm thinking about as a gastroenterologist. So if you were sitting in the office with me, this is what I would be thinking about. Number 1, air that you swallow into the system, it doesn't get absorbed. So if you introduce air into your stomach, it's going to come out either through the top or through the bottom. Most of the time when you are belching because it's air that you have swallowed. It is not air produced by your microbes. So how does air sneak in? You could be sipping through a straw. Think about how much air is inside the top part of that straw. Take a look next time you have a straw.
Oh, I never thought of that. It's interesting.
Yeah, you create a vacuum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you wrap your lips around, you create a vacuum, and everything that's above the water level is just air.
I reckon there's a whole heap of people listening to this going, oh my gosh. Anyway, because I've never heard that and I've never thought about that. Yeah.
Chewing on gum, sucking on hard candies, you start to salivate, you swallow more. Every time you swallow, you're sending air down potentially. Carbonated drinks, I realize that sounds very obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many patients come to see me complaining about belching and bloating, and they drink like 3, 4, 5 cans of soda per day. Carbonated drinks have gas. If you are an aggressive eater, so many people don't necessarily think about this, but like if you've ever been told that you eat very fast or that you chug and gulp when you drink, sloppy eating, aggressive eating, fast eating leads to sloppy swallows, which means more air getting introduced. So number 1, air that you swallow. Number 2, your motility, the way that your intestines move. Okay. The number 1 cause of gas and bloating in my clinic is constipation. I know that my patients who are constipated, I know that they're better when they stop complaining about gas and bloating.
Right.
Because that means that I have mobilized their stool. And there's an interesting thing about this connection between gas, bloating, and constipation. They've studied this and they found that constipation objectively produces more gas. When you're not moving things through, you will produce more gas. You will have more flatulence. And when that occurs, methane gas, which is one of the gases that is produced in this process, methane gas actually slows bowel motility. So you get constipated, which produces more gas, which makes you even more constipated.
Vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
You have to break that cycle. And the way you break the cycle is by getting the bowels moving. All right. Number 3 is your gut microbiome. Your gut microbes are there for a number of different purposes. We talked about the gut-brain connection. We were alluding to the gut-immune connection. There's a gut metabolism connection. There's a gut hormone connection. But when we classically think about the core function of your gut microbes, it's digestion. We rely on these microbes. We need them for proper digestion of our food, for access to nutrients, which, by the way, from an evolutionary perspective, if you think about that, we're giving them a lot of responsibility. That is you can't live without access to nutrients. And we rely on our gut microbes to do that for us. When you have a damaged gut, you should expect, as we were alluding to before with the person who, is struggling and maybe they're doing the low FODMAP diet. When you have a damaged gut, you should expect that you are going to be far more likely to suffer from food intolerances, including gas and bloating. And then the last thing are your dietary choices. So obviously, the food that you put into your mouth has an effect on whether or not you experience gas and bloating. Let me take you through a couple of things that I think about. If a person comes to my clinic and they say, I'm having a lot of gas and bloating, the first 2 foods that I will ask about are artificial sweeteners and dairy. And if they're consuming those 2 things, I will tell them, give it a break for 2 weeks and let's see how you feel. Get rid of the artificial sweeteners and the dairy. Additionally, There's celiac disease, which I know you guys are very familiar with. I would imagine most of your listeners probably are as well. This is a reaction to gluten. Celiac disease is very common, far more common than the 1% that they claim is the statistic. And it's something that I'm always thinking about in a person who's having gas and bloating. Because if you remove the gluten, the gas and bloating goes away. But here's a new one that I am seeing actually more of than I am celiac. We talk so much about celiac, but we're not talking about this other thing that I'm about to mention. Sucrase deficiency. So sucrose, many people have probably heard of, is table sugar. Mm-hmm. Table sugar is everywhere. It's in almost all ultra-processed foods, but it also naturally exists in very healthy foods, not just fruit, but some vegetables have sucrose. And it's not a problem. Those are healthy foods. But some people lack the enzyme called sucrase in order to process these foods. And I actually saw someone today who came in saying, I've been suffering with bloating my entire life, going all the way back to when I was a kid. And I quite simply ran a breath test to look at their sucrase activity, how much of this enzyme they have. And this patient was very deficient.
Wow.
And it is my expectation, although this is like a conversation that literally happened today, it's my expectation that when we fix and address this issue, that this patient is going to see amazing results.
How common do you think this deficiency is, Dr. B?
It's so interesting because in the US, this condition, we call it CSID, congenital sucrase isomaltase deficiency. And it was thought to be less than 1%, like a fraction of 1%, to be honest with you. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that, like, anyone who comes in with gas and bloating, I'm running this test, and 15 to 20% of the time, I find deficiencies.
Wow, that's pretty high.
So, and it can be life-changing for people because the issue is that, like, I think most practitioners know to test for celiac disease, but not enough people are talking about this condition, which is actually more common than celiac disease, congenital sucrase isomaltase deficiency. So, and if you fix the issue, you can consume sucrose without restriction and enjoy it. But the problem is, if you never know that the issue exists, then how could you possibly fix it?
So if you do find somebody or you work out, you go and have a test and you find, what would be your advice to treating and potentially getting over that condition?
So as you guys know, I'm not a believer in restrictive diets. And there are scenarios like, even the low FODMAP diet, for example, it drives me crazy when people permanently restrict FODMAPs. That's not the way that this was intended to be. It was meant to be a temporary restriction and then a reintroduction. With this condition, sucrase isomaltase deficiency, there is an enzyme that is naturally derived. I mean, it's basically a supplement. And there's an enzyme that's naturally derived that can help to augment your sucrase levels. And so quite simply, if you do this enzyme with your meal, then it's as if you have normal sucrase activity and then you're able to eat. So I would far prefer that my patients actually use this enzyme with their meals than to restrict their diet of all sucrose, because that would be a very restrictive diet and that's not good for their gut microbes.
What's this enzyme called? People are probably shouting going, what is it that I have to buy? Or what is it that
sucrase, I think.
Yeah. So I can only speak for the United States. I'm not sure of the Australian market.
Yeah.
In the United States, there's a company that's based out of Florida and it's called Sucrade, Sucraid. Yep. And so Sucrade, it's actually derived from a microbial origin from yeast.
Great. No, look, we don't care about mentioning other companies. We're here to help people. We don't have their supplement. We want to make sure that people get the results that they need. So maybe have a look for that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Great.
I love too. I know we're running a little short on time. I love the fact that you mentioned about the short chain fatty acids. We pronounce it propionate here, but that's all right. But there was a paper in 2015 which talked about the effects of they administered propionate, just 2 grams of propionate into people's bowels, and it increased their basal metabolic rate and increased their satiety. They lost 5% of their body weight just with that one simple soluble fiber microbe. Because in my day when I trained in the 90s, we were told give people fiber, it fills them up and they won't eat as much. But now we know it affects the brain and boosts your basal metabolic rate. So there is more power to soluble fiber than there is just filling you up, isn't there, of course?
It's so fascinating to look into the science of this, because if you really look, I'm a nerd, I'll be the first to admit that. And if you really love science, then you're not looking at one individual study ever as being the authority and the end all be all. What you're doing is you're looking for patterns. You're looking for patterns where what you see on a microscopic level or in an animal model translates to humans on a larger level, translates in clinical trials, translates on epidemiology studies. And the evidence is overwhelming in favor of fiber. We see it on every single one of these levels, and it's consistently there. And the reason why is because of these short chain fatty acids. And so I'll just share with you, I guess, 2 quick studies that are 2 of my favorites. Speaking to what you're talking about with the short chain fatty acids. First is actually a New Zealander.
Very smart people, New Zealanders. Very, very smart.
Why do they have to be New Zealand? Why do they have to be Kiwi?
Apparently so. So Andrew Reynolds published perhaps my favorite study, one of my favorite studies of all time, 2 years ago. And it was a systematic review and meta-analysis of all of the major, both prospective and interventional randomized controlled trials involving dietary fiber, not fiber supplements, dietary fiber. And in this study, they had literally more than 120 million person years of data. Okay.
Wow.
Humans, we've only been on this planet for 3 million years. This is the entirety of human history times 40. And what they found in this was that when you eat more fiber, you decrease your risk of heart disease, you decrease your risk of having a heart attack, you decrease your risk of dying of heart disease. That's our number 1 killer. You decrease your risk of several different types of cancer. You decrease your risk of dying of cancer. That's our number 2 killer. You decrease your risk of having a stroke. You decrease your risk of getting diabetes. You decrease your risk of having chronic kidney disease. You lower your weight. You lower your cholesterol. You lower your blood pressure. All right. Fiber is good for you.
Wow.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And then putting this into practice, there was a study done by Kevin Hall, who is in the United States in metabolism research. He's a big deal. And he's at the National Institutes of Health. And he did the study that we need to see, because the problem is when we're out in the wild and we're free roaming humans, we're worse than herding cats. Like, we are impossible to control. And so what Kevin Hall did is he took a group of people and he brought them into a metabolic unit. So effectively, you can think of this like they're staying in a hospital. And he controlled all of their food. So we know exactly what they were eating, how much of it, how many calories, what the macro and micronutrients were. And he said to them, I want you to eat without restriction. Eat until you're full. Here's what they got on their tray. For 2 weeks, it was a completely 100% plant-based diet, high in fiber. And for the other 2 weeks, it was an animal-based ketogenic diet. Now, if you want to lose weight real quick, like you got like 48 hours to lose weight, people lost more weight on the ketogenic diet upfront in the first 24, 48, 72 hours. But in their analysis, what they discovered was that that was mostly water. If you looked for fat loss, the fat loss was on the plant-based diet. It was progressive. It was getting better and better over the course of the 2 weeks. And there was a reason why. On the plant-based diet, people achieved the same level of satiety. They were equally satisfied with the amount of food that they were eating. They weren't asking for seconds. They ate until they were full. But they consumed almost 700 calories less per day.
Wow.
Because fiber was activating the satiety hormones. And by activating those satiety hormones, you didn't have to count calories. You quite simply ate it until you were full and you lost weight.
Wow.
And that's kind of cool.
That's super cool. And look, I think this whole thing about fiber, I mean, I think the average person, if they heard about fiber, they say, yeah, fiber's good for you because it helps you go to the toilet and it prevents potentially bowel cancer. I mean, obviously you've blown that out of the water. We understand now, and I'm really quite fascinated to dive into your book and actually learn more about what's going on in terms of your microbiome. I mean, we've been huge proponents of polyphenols. We understand that, food is medicine, and that if you completely change your gut, which again, the father of modern medicine said that all health starts in the gut, then, so many things are happening, your hormones, as you said. I mean, like, it's not just about eating fiber and feeling fuller, so therefore I eat less calories, so therefore, which is true, and you've just said that in the study, but it's actually really changing your hormones. It's changing the way that your body processes food. I mean, the depths and understanding exactly everything there. Your book is obviously gonna really help people to understand the benefits of that. So just quickly before we go, and I really want you to just give us a little bit of an overview of your book, maybe some of the things that we haven't mentioned that are in your book. But before we do that as well too, just in terms of what has probably been the biggest aha or the biggest epiphany that you've had while researching, to bring out your book. Was there anything that really stood out in terms of science or stories or anything that you want to share on that?
Oh gosh, it's really hard because there's so many aha moments when you're sitting there researching a book. I mean, you're really digging into the details, and I think that the bottom line, if I were to just kind of simplify it, and perhaps this people would say, well, that's very obvious. This is the theme of our entire conversation. But I really felt like in researching for my book, it was so clear to me. And this is coming from someone who I'm into science. I want facts. And it was so clear to me that when you look at our modern 21st century epidemics, it's so obvious that the origin is in the gut. And our lifestyle, and this is not just a fiber thing, our lifestyle has been decimating to these microbes. And we need to rekindle our relationship with them. And in order to do that and to be successful, it's not going to be quite simply increase the grams of fiber in your diet. There's more to it than just that. And that's really what my book is about, is showing you, like, let me show you this relationship that we have with our microbes, why they're so important. And then let me empower you with the knowledge that you need so that you can actually take the bull by the horns and transform your gut microbes and restore function and make that gut muscle strong again and turn it into the gut that you want it to be, because you're empowered with science, and that science is going to guide you in the right direction. So I guess to answer your question, that to me was the biggest aha moment. Was I have all this medical training. I spent 16 years to be able to do what I do. And yet, what I think is the most important thing that I've learned, and my biggest contribution to medicine, is something that I did not learn in my conventional medical training. And that's the importance of the gut for human health.
Incredible.
Great.
Now, you also run a course too, don't you? You run short courses, don't you?
I run a combination of both short courses, long courses. I have a course that is a 7-week course that I'm very proud of. And it's effectively intended for the person who wants to take a deep dive into really, truly understanding all things related to digestive function. So when I say that, I'm not just talking about the gut and the microbes. I'm also referring to different diagnoses, different testing, what foods you should eat, supplements. So all of that is in my course. It's a 7-week program that includes audio lessons, video lessons, a workbook, live Q&A sessions with me, guest experts, recipes. I mean, basically, I've cut no corners, I've spared no expenses, and I've created a course where my intention is people emerge from this course and they are empowered with the knowledge that they need in order to heal their gut. And I've had healthcare practitioners who take the course too, and I get great feedback from them. So it's I love to teach. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's excellent. One of the things that Steve, Elisma, and Matt and I are working on at the moment is actually a range of supplementation, education, and other things like that around gut health. We should absolutely look to work with you and integrate that. If you've already done the work, that would be something that would be fantastic. So if people want to, whether you're a practitioner or if it's lay, obviously you can do this. Is open to everybody?
100%. It's open to everybody.
So where do people go if they want to learn more, Dr. B?
Well, just sort of globally in general, beyond the course itself. If you want to connect with me, the easiest thing to do is to go to my website, which is theplantfedgut.com. So theplantfedgut.com. And I have a free 7-day challenge that anyone can do. It's completely free. Just basically give me your email address and I'll send you some emails and we'll rock and roll. I have an email list where I break down new studies that come out. So some of the studies that we've talked about are studies that I've talked to my list about and like given all the details on. You'll find out about my course. You'll find out about my book. My book is called Fiber Fueled. It's available in Australia. It's paperback in Australia.
Wow, that's great.
And which is kind of cool. It's the only place where it's a paperback. So I love that.
Yeah. We're antiquated here. We have a mouse that looks after the internet. And if he takes a little break, we get nothing done. So
I think about it that you guys are more active than we are as Americans. So we're laying on our couch reading a hardcover, and you guys are on the beach with a soft cover, enjoying like a nice day. So,
and obviously it's available on any other platforms. Can you get it for your Kindle, or can you get it download through those sorts of services as well too?
100%. It's available through all the major platforms. It's available as an ebook if you prefer that. It's available as an audio book.
Oh wow, great!
I've received great feedback on the audiobook. And and one last thing, many people know me from social media. I'm on Instagram. That's how this all started, this crazy journey. I started that 5 years ago, and so you can find me on Instagram as theguthealthmd. That's my screen name.
Great handle.
And I did read the book last night, actually, and it's a very good book. I think it's be a great read for people. And there's also a 28-day plan in the back of it. So it's really good for people to get hold of that and have a read and do the 28-day challenge.
I love the chapter about eating the rainbow.
Eating the rainbow.
Eating the rainbow.
Not Skittles, I take it. Are we allowed to say that? Will we be shut down? Yeah, taste the rainbow. There could be some trademark infringements there. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's great. And of course, diversity. And I know as well too that we're so passionate about that, about diversity, eating different looking foods, different colors. I mean, there's all sorts of different nutrients that we miss out if we make our diet just rigid. And look, there is a tendency to do that, I think, in fast lifestyles. And I've seen it as well too, especially guys that are prepping and people that are trying to lose weight. They'll do a massive cook on Sunday and it's all chickily. It's chicken and broccoli and there's no diversity there. But sorry, Dr. B, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for your time. This was really great. And again, guys, if you want to learn more, we can go to those websites and we'll put them up in the links as well too below. Anything else, guys?
No, that's terrific.
I mean, I have loads of questions.
Yeah, I know. We could probably
go on and on.
We could probably do another one as well too.
Probably do another one.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, sure.
That's great.
Dobbed you in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time. Yeah, appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you.